What is up, guys? It's Orgaflop, and today I'm coming at you with a new series, and probably a video you've been waiting for a while, since I did a poll on Twitter regarding to this video. I'm going to be starting a new series, and I will post on Twitter, what cars you want me to review and talk about. Similar to how Donut Media does Up to Speed, I've kind of been, motivated to do this. So I asked you guys on Twitter. I brought up two cars, the Dodge Challenger Hellcat and the Toyota Supra Mark IV specifically. And you guys said the Dodge Challenger Hellcat, so here we are. This is episode 1 of A Normie's Guide to Cars, the Dodge Challenger Hellcat. Now, as we all know, Dodge is a major automotive company within the United States that has produced various cars over the years, with the legendary Hemi V8 that Chrysler provided Dodge and Plymouth back in the 60s and 70s. But the car we're talking about specifically is a car made by Dodge to prove that Dodge is still in the muscle car game, along with Ford and Chevrolet. But before we get into that, let's get into the brief history of Dodge. So the Dodge brothers were two boys who always had an engineering history like the Wright brothers, and they worked on bicycles at around, I want to say 1910 and 1920. And then what they saw with Henry Ford, and they saw what he was developing, they built their own car, and then Dodge was created with the help of their father. They're not spoon-fed, don't worry. So, yeah, they... They made their first car. I forgot what it was called. But they actually did have engines from Ford. Because at one point when, the Dodge brothers were very small. They couldn't have the money to, invest with their own company. So Ford did help them out. Because the Dodge brothers did, they gave Ford enough money for Ford to, take the ownership of Dodge. In 1920, Dodge as a automotive company, I forgot what car they first made, but I think it was just called a straight up Dodge, if I'm correct. I don't know. I forgot what the car's name was. But Dodge exploded, and in the 20s, the Ford Model T and the new Pontiacs, they just called them Pontiacs for whatever reason. So they came out with their own, and Dodge exploded. And because Dodge exploded, a company before Dodge started, Chrysler, was a small automotive company that was losing a battle to Dodge. They saw Dodge's success, gave the Dodge brothers their money, and Chrysler owned Dodge. And now we are in the 1940s. World War II is happening right now. The Dodge brothers continue to make cars, and they, mainly economical boat V8s, powered by Dodge and Chrysler. And then the 60s. And the early 60s, they released the Dodge Charger and the Dodge Challenger. And during this time, Plymouth was a rise because they had enough money to, afford to make another manufacturer. So Plymouth became a thing, and Jeep became a thing in World War II. They started making the Wrangler and that. And Chrysler was looking strong. Chrysler was being built, and they were getting new cars and new supplies. And Chrysler was looking very strong at the time. So Chrysler ordered Dodge, hey, we're up there with Ford and GM. So how about we make something that the people would love? And in the 60s, as we know, this is where the muscle car era started. 1964. You had the Mustang. 1967, you had the Pontiac GTO. And, Dodge sees that, and Chrysler develops one of the most legendary V8s of all time, the Hemi. The Hemi engine was in multiple different cars, and was in NASCAR at one point. There you go, NASCAR fans. It was in NASCAR. Sorry, I'm choking. The Hemi V8 was put in multiple cars. Dodge developed the Charger and Challenger for a big, long, big, badass muscle car, like the GTO, the Camaro, and the Firebird, and the Mustang. So they developed the Charger and the Challenger. Plymouth had the Barracuda, and they had the Roadrunner. Two awesome-ass muscle cars. All four cars sharing the same V8 that was provided by Chrysler, called the Hemi. And this was an experimental V8 at first, so they put it in the 67 Challenger and the 67 Charger. They did a couple of track runs, and then they sold it to the public. Not only did the Hemi V8 sell well, and Dodge was skyrocketing through sales, NASCAR, oh my god, big voice crack there. NASCAR actually looked at Dodge and picked them up. Same with Plymouth. And obviously in NASCAR at the time, this was the late 60s, 67, 68, 69. At the time, Dodge was losing, and Dodge and Plymouth were losing to Ford, and Ford had the Gran Torino at the time in NASCAR. And because Ford had the Gran Torino, they were dominating races. They had the horsepower and everything. So Dodge ended up, developing the 1970 Charger with a more sleek grille a little bit, and they had like dotted taillights. The Challenger was never put in NASCAR. The Challenger stays the way it is right now. And then Plymouth is also struggling. They had the Roadrunner at the time, and they had the Barracuda for a couple of years. But then Plymouth and Dodge, instead of looking at horsepower, they knew Ford had the horsepower. And they knew that they wouldn't beat Ford on the horsepower. So what did Dodge do in Plymouth? They built two of the most legendary stock cars ever. You've seen it in the movie Cars. You've seen it with Richard Petty and Bobby Isaac. The Dodge Daytona and the Plymouth Superbird. Two amazing muscle cars that had aerodynamic, sleek, pointy noses and a large spoiler in the back. I guess you could make a joke that say they started the Big Wang Gang. But the Dodge Daytona and the Plymouth Superbird won 28 out of the 32 races in the 1970 season. And Richard Petty was becoming champion. He won many races. I believe he won 17 out of the 32 races. And Bobby Isaac won 7. Something like that. I forgot. But, Ford was still strong. But Ford and Chevy had the Chevelle at the time in NASCAR. And then Ford had the Ford Torino. They couldn't figure out what to do. And in 1972, NASCAR banned the Dodge Daytona and the Plymouth Superbird based on too much horsepower, and they were too aerodynamically dependent, and they were dominating the field. For the main reason that the rule, at the time of the late 60s and early 70s, NASCAR had the rule that if you could go over 200 miles an hour, the car is deemed illegal and non-competitive to other cars. So the Hemi V8 at the time was carrying 335 horsepower, which was a milestone back in the 70s. And the Challenger and Charger were slowly declining as there was a gas crisis in the mid-70s and people were looking at, instead of big, powerful muscle cars, they were looking at small Japanese coupes like the Toyota Celica or the Nissan Sentra. And those were becoming a big thing. And they were economical cars because they were getting 40 miles per gallon, where these big V8 engines were getting only 9 miles per gallon. So people wanted to save money on gas, so they started buying these more economical suited cars for, those purposes. And for those purposes, people were buying these cars, and the American manufacturers were starting to tank. Dodge ended up, they ended up shutting down production of the Charger and the Challenger. And they just kind of became this and Dodge wasn't the only one that was affected by this. Pontiac was affected. The Firebird was still pretty strong at the time. It still had the big V8. So Pontiac still had the Firebird going. They ended the GTO, I think, after 1978. They ceased production of the GTO. Ford got rid of the Torino. They made the someone from GM came over to Ford at one point, and they made the Mustang King Cobra, which in my opinion is one of the biggest and most failure Mustangs ever. It had like a V6. It only made like I think it was a 3.1 liter V6. It only made like 151 horsepower. You get what I'm saying, though. All American manufacturers were affected by this. So Dodge, Chevy, and Ford, they realized, well, people like carrying stuff around, right? So they came out with the trucks. The Ford F-150, the Chevy Silverado, and the Dodge Ram were born. They had the V8s that the old muscle cars did, and they were able to have dependability and, toughness for people to carry stuff. So that's how the V8 still existed. If trucks weren't like the main key to keep them going, V8s would have been killed back in the late 70s. Now we're going to jump to the 90s. The year is 1999. Dodge is really doing bad in sales, and Chrysler in general wants Dodge to become a stronger manufacturer like they were again. The year is 1992. Dodge says, well, let's find something economical that'll suit the modern millennial. Therefore, the Dodge Viper was born. The Dodge Viper was a death trap, to joke around with, but the Dodge Viper in 1992 was literally the car accident machine, and it would literally kill anyone who drives it because the traction was terrible in the Viper. It handled terrible. There was no grip. Even in the hot summers where you're supposed to have grip, the Viper would always spin the rear wheels because it was so light, and it would crash you and kill many people easily. It had like 50 million deaths with the Dodge Viper. It was terrible. So they redesigned the Viper in 96, and it was a lot safer, and it was bought by even more people, and the Viper was a huge success. So, as Dodge continues to make the Viper throughout the 2000s and the 90s, Plymouth is really struggling. Dodge was able to recover, but Plymouth was doing terrible. They made the abomination of the Plymouth Prowler. Oh, that car was absolutely terrible. I don't know what Plymouth was trying to do. I think they were just trying to throw back to the old hot rod days of the early 1900s. I don't know if that was the goal, but God, that car was an abomination. It tanked in sales. It was hated amongst many people, and it handled like shit, and it was not safe whatsoever. So, to say the least, the Prowler was a huge, terrible design. It had a V6 only making 200 horsepower. That wasn't much for the late 90s. I forgot to mention Dodge pulled out of NASCAR in the 90s and 80s, so forgot to mention that. I think they pulled out in the 70s, actually. But things are looking better for Dodge. Dodge buys Plymouth, so Plymouth dies because they were doing terrible in sales and they weren't doing good enough. So Dodge buys Plymouth. Plymouth sells all their stuff to they sell all their stuff to Dodge. Dodge gets more money. What do they do with it? The year is 2003. The Viper is still selling amazing. They get back into NASCAR, baby. They are back in NASCAR. They're back in the NHRA, and they're back in IMSA because of the Viper. GTLM and GTD class, the Viper GT500 was in it at the time, in the IMSA GT2 class and the IMSA GT3 class back in 2003. For NASCAR in 2003, Dodge had the new Intrepid that was recently being developed. The Stratus and the Intrepid were more like four-door sedans that suited NASCAR at the time. Went on Sunday, sell on Monday. The Dodge Intrepid was in NASCAR in 2003. The mid-2000s, Dodge also, they go back into NHRA with the Intrepid and the Stratus as well. In the mid-2000s, we all know it's the mid-2000s. JDM is becoming a large spectacle in the Americas. You got the Honda Civic, the Toyota Supra, the Nissan Skyline GTR, the Mitsubishi Evo, the Subaru WRX, the Nissan Fairlady Z, the Nissan Silvia. So many JDM cars are being bought by teenagers, and Japanese companies are doing amazing in sales in the United States. Mid-2000s, Dodge comes out with an inline-four, four-door front-wheel drive sedan similar to the Honda Civic, powered by Dodge, called the Dodge Neon. It was a huge. It was okay. Like, it did okay in sales, but not enough people bought it. But it was a sleeper. It was pretty fast for 2005 and 2004. It was pretty fast. So Dodge is doing great in sales. Chrysler they're doing that with their money. They're doing better than GM and Ford right now in the mid-2000s. And they said, well, people want to look back at the days when V8s and, big blocks and big V8s that, muscle car buyers would love. They saw these people, taking their old Hemi V8s and, the old Plymouths, and they were taking them to car shows, and they missed the days of all that era. So, what does Dodge do? In 2008, they bring back, or in 2006... Or no, 2005, actually, the same year the Neon was in its second year. They bring back the Dodge Charger with a whopping 435 horsepower Hemi V8 newly developed by Chrysler. And Dodge is looking back into the muscle car game. The Charger this time is a four-door sedan because they want to suit it as more of a sleeper type. And they want to appease the crowd. The Charger's doing great in sales. The Charger goes into NASCAR, the NHRA. Didn't go to IMSA. They still had the Viper at the time. But Dodge is doing amazing. So the year is 2008. Guess what car they bring back? The Dodge Challenger with the same 435 horsepower Hemi V8, and it does great in sales. Chrysler is swimming in money. They are doing so good. And Ford and Chevy, I mean, they've been battling with the Mustang. Pontiac's dead at this point. 2 years later, Pontiac dies. Fuck you, GM. Pontiac dies because GM's a bunch of assholes, and they decided to kill Hummer, Saab, and Pontiac. Anyway, Chevy brings back the Camaro in 2010. The Ford brings back continues the production with the Mustang, but it wasn't doing too well till 2005. And Dodge realizes Ford's success, and so does Chrysler. And Chrysler also comes out with their own production car called the Chrysler 300 SRT, which also had the 435 horsepower Hemi. The muscle cars continue to do great. They have the Dodge SRT-8. SRT was a big developer in Dodge, and they still are today. And here we go. Okay, I know I've been talking for 16 minutes about Dodge, and we're here to talk about the Hellcat, right? Welcome to 2015. Big year for Chrysler. People want more power. The SRT Hemi V8 engine isn't good enough, they say. It doesn't have enough horsepower, they say. It's not like the old days, they say. What does Dodge do? They take the Charger. They take the Challenger. You know what they do? They put a slicker hood scoop on it, make a slicker grill and rear, make the roof slicker, and they put in a 570 horsepower V8 pumped up Hemi with a positive displacement supercharger with a whopping 707 horsepower. Holy crap. We're talking a four-door sedan as the Dodge Charger, and the Charger was also called the Hellcat, and the Dodge Challenger is also the Hellcat at the time. This supercharger, my God, it's an awesome-ass sounding car. That supercharger is something else. Let me tell you that. It is something else. If you see a Hellcat do a pull at the drag strip or anything like that, it is amazing. The sound of the supercharger and the Hemi V8 from the back of the exhaust. It's a dual exhaust system as well. Both the Charger Hellcat and the Challenger Hellcat have a dual exhaust system with 18-inch rims. It's a badass car. Chevy, they had the Camaro ZL1. At the time, Ford had the Shelby GT500 with 660 horsepower. But when they saw Dodge do this, they had to step up their game immediately. Not even the Corvette. The Corvette ZR1 now, it's got 900 horsepower, but at the same time, the Hellcat still got it in a straight line sometimes. It's amazing. The year is 2016, though. Dodge has put so much money into the Hellcats that they had to, unfortunately, kill the Viper. As the Viper wasn't doing well in sales, it was doing less good in IMSA. And sadly, we lost the Viper in 2016. Very sad day for the Viper fans. The V10 Dodge provided for the Viper was amazing. Never forget the Dodge Viper, 1992 to 2016. Great car still. It just couldn't compete with the sales with the Hellcats. 2017 comes around. Jeep wants in on this horsepower. They want that supercharger. So what does Chrysler do? All right, we'll give it to you. The Jeep Grand Cherokee. Not the Jeep Grand Cherokee Hellcat. They call this the Trackhawk, okay? 770 horsepower SUV with a supercharged Hemi V8. Supercharged 5.7 liter Hemi, just like the two Hellcats. Amazing car, amazing SUV. A lot, when a soccer mom buys a Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk and they find out it's got a V in it, they freak the fuck out. I think it's amazing. 2017 was also a whopping year as Um, oh my gosh. And that year was crazy. Dodge would become the first manufacturer ever in U.S. history and car history to make a street-legal drag car, the Dodge Demon. Now, I know this has nothing to do with the Hellcats. I'll get back to the Hellcats later. 800 horsepower with a bigger Hemi V8, 6-liter Hemi, with the same positive displacement supercharger with the Hellcats. Oh my god. It was so good that the NHRA banned it. At this point, also, Dodge left NASCAR because NASCAR sucks nowadays. So they didn't want anything to do with NASCAR. I forgot to mention that. So Chrysler just said, hey, Dodge, you're good. Get out of NASCAR. This isn't valuable to us anymore. I forgot to mention that. But the Dodge Demon, 800 horsepower. The NHRA banned it. That's how good it is. You can, I mean, sure, it weighs a lot, but that 800 horsepower and sleek grille with the airflow coming into the engine, great car. If you want a modern-day drag car without doing too many mods to it, I think Dodge also gives you, like, a package to, like, put skinnier tires in the front, fatter tires in the back. You can set up launch control, race control. It's amazing. Dodge Demon, great car. Now, let's talk about the Hellcats. Hellcats, the thing that makes the Dodge Challenger and Charger Hellcats so special is they brought back the old school muscle car feel. Sure, you got the Camaro and the Mustang, and the Coyote V8 is great, don't get me wrong. The LT1 in the Camaro sounds like shit. But I think Dodge kept their old school. They kept the old school name. Chrysler kept the old school name. At this point, I think Chrysler still, they didn't have a supercharged Chrysler 300 SRT, but I think they still have the SRT8, the Hemi V8. The way the Hellcats, what they did to the country and what they did around the car world was something we'll probably never see again. They brought back the old school muscle car feel. They brought back the muscle car era with they kept the Hemi name going. Even when their muscle cars were tanked in the 80s and 90s, they brought back the old school feel with the old name of the Hemi, and putting a supercharger in it makes it even better because at the time, most people love superchargers. And the fact that you can make a street-legal car, a four-door sedan like the Charger, and a muscle car like the Challenger, if you're able to put 707 horsepower into those things and you're able to keep them street-legal, and it's easily one of the most fun cars to drive. I've never driven one myself. I've seen them at the drag strip, though. I've sat inside them before. Great cars, great interior. Everything about them is amazing. If you're looking to buy a muscle car and you really want to get that horsepower, get the Dodge Challenger and Charger Hellcats. They're definitely worth your money, and they're definitely worth a consumer's buying. Just the way they paved the muscle car era was amazing. Obviously Ford and Chevy have been going duke to duke with the Camaro and Mustang. But to me, I see the Hellcats as their true muscle cars because they've got the old school name. They've got a lot of horsepower. They weigh a lot. Not saying they're boats, but they do weigh a lot. But they just paved the way for what we have now. And we're bringing back the old school muscle car feel. We got the Challenger and the Mustang and the Camaro. 3 legendary muscle cars we haven't really seen this popularized in the car world and maybe in the world itself since the 60s and 70s. And the 90s as well, if you want to count like the IROC and the Fox Body Mustang. I mean, if you want to do that, then go ahead. But no manufacturer has achieved the old school, lot of horsepower feel, combining the two together to make a whopping, outstanding product than Dodge did. The Challenger, obviously a legendary muscle car made by Dodge, and same with the Charger. I mean, I kind of think they might have ruined the Charger by making it a four-door sedan, but whatever. You can't really have two at the time now, since maybe it'd be more cost for Dodge. I don't know. Um, I really think that the thing that makes the Hellcat so much of an impact to the car world is they brought back the throwback old school feel, but they combined it with modern day horsepower. I think that's what Chrysler in general and Dodge has been great at over the years. They've always been able to key in on what the people want, and the older people want, the old school OGs that have had like old Dodge Chargers and Plymouth Roadrunners. Dodge was able to take the old school feel and the new school feel, combine it into one. You get a lot of horsepower, a supercharger, and a Hemi V8 with the Challenger and Charger. Out of the two, I'd say if you want to go a cheaper route, get the Charger Hellcat because that's probably cheaper. If you want the expensive route, but you want even, a more muscle feel, get the Challenger Hellcat. These two cars mean so much because they paved the way for what the muscle car era is right now. I mean, yeah, you got the Mustang and the Camaro, but these two cars really bring back the old nostalgic feel, along with combining with what the people want. So the Hellcat is just such an amazing. They're two amazing cars that built by Dodge. I've never been really a Mopar fan myself. I'm a JDM person. I like Japanese tuners, and I like Pontiac. Like Pontiac's really the only manufacturer I really like, or out of the U.S. I like some of Chevy, but Pontiac's the only GM manufacturer I like really. And some Chevy I like too. I like Ford too. I've just never been a Mopar person, but I have huge respect for Chrysler and what they've done with, the Dodge and Plymouth over the years. And I'm glad they were able to bring back a nostalgic factor that people are going to remember forever. Everyone's going to look back and remember, yeah, I remember when Dodge made the Hellcat and the Charger and Challenger Hellcat. Two amazing cars that, us marketers would love to buy and get the old nostalgic feel. That's all for the Dodge Challenger and Charger Hellcats. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and tell me in the comments what you think, if you want me to keep going with this. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.